Welcome, friends, to the Do Less, Be More channel. I'm Amy, and this is a 4-part Ask the Expert series on burnout. I've got an incredible network and community of inspiring teachers, healers, coaches, and practitioners who come with a wealth of knowledge and experience. And so I wanted to bring some of these inspiring humans into conversation with me around burnout. Burnout is very prevalent today. It almost feels like an epidemic, more so than ever, and especially since the beginning of 2020. And so I believe that it's really important for us to talk about it so that we can hopefully find ways not only to heal through and recover from burnout as a collective, but also move towards operating in a society where burnout is not the norm. Through awareness comes prevention, and just as each of us holds a single point of awareness in the experience of this ever-expanding universe, there are also various points of awareness or ways to look at burnout. So in this 4-part series, we're going to explore burnout from 4 different perspectives: the mental, the physical, the spiritual, and the emotional. And this week, I am super excited to bring on Jeremy Godwin, the producer of the Let's Talk About Mental Health podcast, to chat about burnout from the psychological or mental health perspective. Hi, Jeremy.
Hello.
I'm very excited to be doing this with you. Thank you so much for agreeing to chat burnout with me.
Thank you for having me. I feel honored.
Yeah, I'm excited.
In case you can't tell from my accent, by the way, I'm from Texas, so
yeah, very clear.
I'm from Australia. So hi, everyone.
Yes, amazing. Well, we should have a few different countries represented on this whole Ask the Expert series, so it should be fun. So we're exploring burnout from 4 different perspectives: mental, physical, emotional, and spiritual. And I'm super thrilled that you are here with me to discuss burnout from the mental or psychological perspective. So if you want to maybe start us off with just who you are and what you do and what makes Jeremy qualified to talk about mental health.
Thanks. Well, I'm a writer and counselor from Australia who specializes in better mental health, and I work with clients all around the world. And I also create a weekly podcast, which is called Let's Talk About Mental Health, funnily enough. And then I also do a weekly show on YouTube, which is Better Mental Health. So my focus is very much on providing simple ways to improve your mental health. And I base that on quality research as well as personal experience. And everything that I do is very much focused on practicality. How can you take things that are simple, straightforward, and then go put them into practice immediately? So that's me.
It's perfect. That's exactly what we're aiming for. And your podcast is amazing.
Thank you. Greatly appreciate it.
Laugh, and it is practical. So key components for good mental health: laughter and things you can use.
Well, I'm hoping that the laughter was on the bits that I intended people to laugh at and not just randomly.
Your little like Spice Girl quips and things like that.
Oh, I can't help myself. I'm obsessed with the Spice Girls. I'm actually talking to you at the moment with Spice Girls dolls looking down on me. So it's a whole vibe. I can't help myself.
I love it. I taught my daughter all about Spice Girls when she was starting to get into pop music at like 2 or 3 or 4. I have a video when she was 4 years old, dancing around in her Princess Disney dress, like singing Spice Girls. So good.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Raise them early.
Yeah. Okay, so first question for you, now that you've introduced us to you, is what is your personal experience with burnout? Have you ever been burnout before yourself? And if so, can you share your burnout story?
Well, the answer to the have I ever experienced burnout? Absolutely. I had a total breakdown in late 2011. And look, it was due to a combination of factors. And I think most mental health challenges often are due to a variety of factors coming together. It was work and home, but the main point that got me to that stage of absolute breakdown was sheer exhaustion at work. So for context, I was working at least 50 to 60 hours a week, usually more. And I just felt like I couldn't keep up with everything that was expected of me, not just at work, but that kind of like translated into my home life and extended family and friends and all of that stuff. And so for me, it came as a bit of a shock. Actually, it came as quite a shock. There was one day that I went to work and I could not physically speak to anyone. I couldn't do anything and I just shut down. And I remember getting in my car, it was about 10:30, and I was just, I can't do this anymore. And I said, I'm going home for the day. I'll work from home for the rest of the day. I got in my car and I lived 25 minutes away. I have no idea how I got home. All of a sudden I'm home. I don't remember the drive. To this day, I don't remember the drive. And so that kicked off a series of events. So the burnout for me actually then became linked to quite severe depression and anxiety. And I didn't realize it at the time, and even in the lead up to the burnout. But the reality is that I was trying to constantly fill from an empty cup. And you can do that all that you like, but you just cannot run on empty. There is a point physically and mentally where if you try to just keep on running when you are tapped out of energy, you will run out of the ability to keep showing up and keep making yourself present for the people that matter. I will say that for me though, and I obviously now have the benefit of 10, 11 years worth of hindsight, although my burnout led me to some very, very dark places, and these are things I talk about all the time in my podcast, the silver lining is that it actually forced me to not just leave the corporate sector, but it actually forced me to completely change my life. I'm a different person than I was 10 years ago. And so now I get to do things with my life that feel genuinely meaningful and fulfilling. So there are good things that can come out of it, but we don't want to proactively go chasing the burnout. Prevention is definitely better than cure, but it's not the end of the world.
Absolutely. Yeah. Burnout can be a huge teacher. Right?
Absolutely.
If we're ready to reap the lessons from it, it's an amazing eye opener. Great awakening. Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah, definitely a great awakening. I can relate to a lot of your story myself. Yeah, we grow a lot, and it's, for the better out of it, I believe. So.
I think so as well. And I think when you're in it, I mean, I kind of touched on this before as well. And, I'm interested to know how it was for you. But for me, I was in it and was like, I'm never going to recover from this. This has ruined my life. And then you get to a point where you go, actually, hang on a second. Sure, change is painful, but what's actually happening here is that the things that are making me feel more challenged and less happy and satisfied in life are actually being stripped away. And so it's not like you wake up one day and go, woohoo, burnout. But I think there is a stage where all of a sudden you get enough hindsight that you can look back and go, oh, that wasn't so bad.
Yeah. Eventually, there's got to be good enough time and space gap between.
We're not talking about months or even a couple of years here. We're talking quite some time.
For sure. Yeah. In hindsight, it's a great experience.
Definitely.
When you're in the thick of it. I was the same. It was almost like torture, and extreme highs and extreme lows, right? The believing that you're right. Like you don't see anything outside of it. So there's got to be a way. There's got to be a way to make it work, make it happen. And then there's the lows of exasperation and devastation and despair. And burnout can be quite the roller coaster.
Certainly can be.
Yeah. So if we were to talk about burnout strictly from a mental health or psychological perspective, what would that mean? What does burnout mean from that point of view?
Well, the thing from a psychological standpoint is that burnout quite often goes hand in hand with chronic stress. And the thing with that is, we all deal with stress on a day-to-day basis, but when it becomes a chronic condition where it's really challenging to be able to push past and also to still be able to find joy in the small things, that's where you can be in danger of developing conditions like anxiety and depression, which two of the most common mental health conditions in the world. And the thing there as well is that from a mental health standpoint, it's actually quite dangerous, because what it does, burnout and chronic stress, what it does is it's resulting in your survival instincts, that fight, flight, or freeze response being turned on most or all of the time. So really helpful in prehistoric ages when, the idea of walking out into the woods meant that you might be chased by a lion or a tiger or bear. However, in today's society, we still have those instinctive responses that are fear-based and trying to keep us safe, but we're not being chased by lions and tigers and bears. And so the piece there is around, all right, well, if you're constantly in that fight, flight, or freeze mode, then you are actually on edge most of the time, or if not all of the time, and you are more likely to experience anxiety in the longer term. And so the piece there is that it can definitely increase your likelihood of those mental health conditions. It also affects you on a physical level. And I know we're talking about mental health here, but we also need to acknowledge that your physical health directly impacts on your mental health, and your mental health directly impacts on your physical health. Because high level stress, chronic stress, burnout causes your body to produce elevated levels of stress hormones. So we're talking about adrenaline, cortisol, and the like. And over time, those hormones at consistently high levels actually do damage not only to your mental health, but also they can cause damage to your organs. They can damage your heart. They can do a whole bunch of really severe damage to your body. And so my main point here is very much about sort of recognizing that the mental health and the physical health go hand in hand. And so that's why taking care of your body, mind, and spirit is absolutely essential. And I mentioned before, prevention is better than cure. And so even if you are in a situation where you need to tackle a condition that you're already dealing with, there are ways to do that. But the sooner you start working on how to improve your situation, the better the likelihood is that you'll be able to address it and move forward in a healthy way, mentally and physically.
Absolutely. We can do our best to dissect each aspect of burnout, but they are so interwoven. We can't chop up the person into a mental body and into a physical body and so on. But we can understand each aspect a little more deeply and how they all integrate. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. Are there any other aspects of burnout from a mental health perspective that you can share in terms of just knowledge and know-how and what's happening in our brains?
Absolutely. So when you are in a state of heightened stress or heightened fear, or both, what's happening is one of the most ancient parts of our brain, the amygdala, is what is thought to be in control of the fight, flight, freeze response. And so the amygdala, when you are threatened or feel threatened emotionally and mentally, your amygdala takes over. And yes, it floods your body with all of those chemicals because it's priming you to either take off or to fight back or whatever the case might be. But it also is inhibiting your ability to think about things from a logical and rational standpoint. And that's where it becomes really challenging when you're dealing with burnout and chronic stress, because you're running on pure adrenaline and pure emotion. And so it's really easy to buy into those feelings. Not that the feelings aren't valid, but they need to be tempered with rational thought. I talk in my podcast all the time, most of the time, about the fact that life is balance. And so it's about being able to find a balance between the emotional and mental signals that we're receiving versus logical, rational fact, and really being able to live in the middle.
Totally. Yeah. And when you speak to logic, that really highlights for me decision fatigue that happens, right?
Yes.
Prolonged stress and the emotions take over, the logic kind of goes by the wayside. We can't make decisions anymore. Decision fatigue is a big aspect of that.
It's almost the mental equivalent of feeling like you're in quicksand. And so being able to find ways to manage that, which I'll talk about in a second, is going to help you to feel like you're being pulled out of that emotional mental quicksand.
Totally. Okay, so if somebody came up to you and they said they were experiencing burnout right now, what are some tips or recommendations? Maybe give us 3 that you would offer them.
3 things that I would suggest, which I think are probably the most powerful. First and foremost, talk to someone. Look, ideally a professional like a counselor or therapist. At the very least, however, talk to a trusted friend or a family member about what you're going through. But I will make the point to say that as wonderful as our friends and family are, they can never be completely objective because they have an emotional connection to us. And so being able to find a balance between talking to people who know you, love you, and care about you to give you that kind of emotional support, that needs to be balanced with talking to somebody who is able to remain objective and look at the situation from a professional standpoint. To me, that is the number one thing, because if you hold it in, it can create an enormous amount of damage. And the more you talk about it, the easier it gets. My second piece of advice would be, I would encourage you to make changes immediately. And By that, I mean, do not wait and see if things get better on their own, because I can tell you that things probably will not get better on their own. The thing is that burnout is a sign that something needs to change, and it needs to change now, because the longer you leave it for, the more likely it is that it will do some type of damage. So, for example, whether that means potentially taking some time off from work or reassessing your job so that you can sort things out, or at work or even at home, getting some help with your workload, be it from family, friends, or from outside help, whatever, or sorting out what it is that needs to change in your life, depending on your own particular situation. So whatever it is of course going to be up to you and your set of circumstances, but know that you cannot keep pushing yourself if you've got nothing left to give. My third and most important point would be, I would highly recommend that you completely reassess your life in terms of identifying what it is that truly matters to you, and then reorient your focus around those priorities. And the reason why I say that is because we get caught up in the day-to-day, and we get caught up in all of these things that when push comes to shove, it doesn't actually matter as much as what we really think it does. And in order to make long-lasting changes that are going to help you to deal with burnout in the long term, you need to really start to look at what is it in your life that is contributing to that burnout, and how do you either remove it or change your relationship to it. Yeah. Now, I will say all of that kind of change and that kind of thought process and self-awareness is very tough, and it is scary. But I would encourage you to bear in mind that endings are also beginnings. And so finding the courage to push through those feelings of burnout will be something that you look back on in years to come and say, that was the point that I changed my life for the better.
Such great advice. And I love the advice that you give, because they're also interconnected. Right. And so it can feel very, very scary and even overwhelming to figure out what you're going to do about your burnout. And so that seeking help, especially professional help, is paramount to that. When I was in the pit of despair with my burnout and depression, it was the first time I saw like a registered psychologist. And that made a huge difference for me. Just in the first month of seeing her, I was able to get clarity. I was able to define what I was in for the first time ever, and then, like you said, it was that assessment, having that support to assess your life, what needs to change, and what are my priorities. Those are huge aspects, and it isn't easy work. So having that professional support is invaluable for sure.
It's not easy at all. And I wanted to just quickly pick up on the one thing that you just said about the changes. And I know this is a cliche, but I'm going to say it anyway. And if anyone listens to my podcast, I say this about 84 times a week. If nothing changes, then nothing changes. And that's the thing. Burnout is providing you with what can be, I know it might not seem like it right now, but it can be a golden opportunity to change the things that are actually taking you away from leading a life that feels truly satisfying.
Yes. It's all about alignment.
All about alignment. Indeed.
Amazing.
Sorry, for anyone who wonders why I just said it that way, Amy and I talk on a regular basis about alignment. She's very good at reminding me to refocus my attention on what is actually keeping me feeling aligned. So
right. Huge. It's such a huge part of it. Thank you so much, Jeremy. And if anybody wants to get in touch with you, what is their best way to connect?
A couple of ways. First, you can find me on Instagram at LTA Mental Health. And you can also catch my YouTube channel, Better Mental Health, where I post a new video every week. Or you can just find my weekly podcast, Let's Talk About Mental Health. It's available wherever you find podcasts, like Spotify and Apple Podcasts and the like. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. That was wonderful. So many beautiful words of wisdom, and definitely actual practical, real things that people can understand and hopefully take on their journey out of burnout.
Thank you so much.